So let us take a moment to just close our eyes and feel that presence within us. Feel that energy, that love that is everywhere present at all times. It is already within. It is within everything. There is nothing where is no place where that love is not. It is in, through, and around everything. And all are part of that. Nothing is outside of it. The rings of Saturn, the core of the sun, even the smallest of insects. And each heart, each breath, everything is part of that oneness, part of that love, part of that power and that joy. And that is at the center of all things. And I speak my word that I am that, and all present, all online, and all throughout the whole universe are that also. Because that is all there is. Love is present and bubbling up. All are connected in this giant web. Everything is within that. Nothing is outside. And I am very grateful to know this, to feel this truth within myself, and to know that every manifestation of that spirit, every manifestation everywhere, is just God expressing itself through everything. And in great gratitude, I release that into that divine law that always says, yes, that is present right here, right now, open and available to all. And as I release that, I say, and so it is.
So as I said, our theme this month is the unstatus quo. And our whole year, we're looking at the idea of a grand rising. And so if we're going to rise, if we're going to expand, we have to let go of some of the things that are familiar to us, some of the, this is how it's always been-ness of our lives, yes? Okay? And so our talk today, we're going to be looking at kind of taboo topics all through the month, kind of stuff we don't normally talk about. The door's back there if you need to run. And so today we're going to talk about the impact of othering. And othering is where we categorize a group, a person, something outside of ourselves as being outside of ourselves and therefore wrong, not good enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes? And so we're going to shake things up a little bit this month. And we all have an experience of what our normal, our status quo is. Yes? Yes? You? Yeah? For some people, it's I don't talk in church. For some people, I don't stand up and dance when the music's really good. I sit here, you know, we kind of jokingly refer to it as old white people's church. That's an othering label, by the way. But if we're going to expand, we have to move beyond our normal, beyond our status quo, or we'll just experience more of the same, over and over again, when there's an infinite banquet of ideas and experiences that are available. You know, we do things, we get the opportunity to try things that are different. You know, yesterday my grandson arrived and steps off the airplane wearing a dress. I'm sitting there going, I've never seen Theo in a dress before. So I asked his mom, I said, you know, is this something new? And she goes, no, he's been doing it for about 5 years. He lives in Sacramento. And she says, you know, it's cooler to wear a dress. And so every summer for the last 5 years, he's just been wearing a dress. Now, I thought it was funny because this week also I had a friend of mine right there who said that she was getting a pedicure and asked if I had ever had a pedicure before. Real men don't get pedicures is a status quo belief that, you know, I might have and others say I might have. But I said, yes, I'll try something new. I'll get out of my status quo. And she says, well, are you going to do coloring? No, I'm not going to color my nails. You know, in the meantime, by the way, I was having this thought as I was working on this talk about, you know, guys don't get to have some of the fun that women have with cool clothes and colored nails and all that stuff. Yes? You know? Well, that's the theory anyway. That's the status quo. You know, old school ministers only wear suits that are black, gray, or blue, right? Or brown. Yep. Old school ministers. Yep. And so it's like, what are we going to do new? So not only did I go get a pedicure, but halfway through it, I said, okay, match my Miata. And so I have bright red toenails. And it's really funny because when I looked at them, I went, those are girls' nails. It's like, they're attached to me. And it was like breaking through that little subtle process that labels and others and stuff like that. So we get to play with that. I'm going to invite you this week as part of our spiritual practice to play with doing something outside of your status quo. Okay? Whatever that looks like. So since the nature of the universe is always for evolution, always for expansion, we can move forward in harmony and willingness, or we can go kicking and screaming with claw marks. Melissa Felipe, who wrote that last song, also has a song called Kicking and Screaming Down the Path of Transformation. And we can do, anybody besides me ever done that process? Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes. And so when we confront change, how many of you right now are still in grief about Amy leaving and trying to figure out how to fix that happening? Right? And there's nothing to fix. More money won't happen, won't help. It's just, it's happening. And so we have to let go. So much of our status quo was taught to us, yes? Okay. What was right, what was wrong, what's appropriate, what's not. Very few of us were taught to think of ourselves as beautiful, perfect expressions of infinite beingness just as we are, right? In fact, often we are taught quite the opposite. And once we adopt the idea that we're separate, flawed, guilty sinners, anybody relate to that besides me? Yeah? The next step is to believe that so is everybody else. And with the lovely human habit of comparing, we start assessing if we or they are better. And instead of looking for and seeing our oneness, our own and each other's wholeness and uniqueness, we apply our tribe's conditioned ideas about who is in and who is out, and we focus on each other's differences, not as something to celebrate, to see each other as a beautiful work of art. Look at your neighbor and say, you're a beautiful work of art. And then hear them when they say it to you. Hear them when they say it to you. But instead, we're trained to apply separation-based conditioning to judge and fear and hate anyone who is not like us or our tribe. Yes? Yes. Yeah. Just look at the world. But see, that's not how the infinite experiences itself as us. And you and I are the infinite experiencing itself as each of us individually. See, the infinite only sees its own beauty, its own perfection, its own creativity. When I took personal growth seminars back in the early 80s, they had a metaphor there of two islands in the ocean. And one was lush and beautiful, and the other was barren and rocky. And so we got into the the label of one is productive, one is not, one is good, one is bad, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look below the level of the water, what's the truth of those islands? They're interconnected. They're connected to the same land mass that's underneath the water. We're all one. We're all one. We're unique expressions of the one. Neither one good nor bad. But so often we stay at that little level that's just a tiny bit above the water of our awareness and look and judge from that. As truly spiritual people, not just in name only, but really committed to living in harmony and alignment with the oneness, we have to move beyond. We have to move beyond our ideas, beyond our judgments and fears, to see the world in a way that is different from the ways most of us were taught. When we can start to shift our perspective, we have to be willing to be uncomfortable as this expansion takes us beyond the nice, orderly way that our intellects love. We like it to be comfortable, yes? Which means I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to walk in here, and experience these people in this setting. What happens if this week we decide to paint the whole place red? I put in for that when we were first designing it. I wanted it to be the same color as my Miata all the way through. Fortunately, Kathy Gillum is a interior designer, and the rest of the committee said, no. I wanted a gold stripe down the middle of it. So what happens? The intellect wants to figure things out so it can act properly and function perfectly and fit in this world, thus getting the goodies, the appearances of control, of love, of power and safety or peace, which it desires. But life, in case you haven't noticed it, isn't a nice, logical, orderly process that always works the way we want. Have you noticed? Sometimes those damn French have drag queens reenact a bacchanalian or Dionysian feast. Those of you who know what I'm talking about, which our intellect didn't get informed about and misinterprets as an Italian painter's painting instead of a French painter's painting of the Last Supper, and it upsets us terribly, yes? Well, some people. And then we, enlightened folks, we look at those people and we other them, right? We make fun of it. Come on. I'm on Facebook. I see the comments. And then we ignore the times that we ourselves misinterpreted something, thinking it was one thing, and suddenly afterwards realizing, and we got all upset, and then finally we realized, oops, actually it wasn't really that way. Anybody besides me, just do your hand a little bit like this? Yeah, okay. Eventually we become aware of the person that we first other is ourselves. We first other ourselves. We other different aspects of ourselves due to the conditioning we received. We other aspects of our body, or even having a body and being human. We feel, this is why I love Louise Hay has a practice that she invites people to do, to stand naked in front of a full-length mirror, look at your whole body and say, I love you. And listen to the chatter that comes up about where I don't love you, right? It's great when you're 18 to be able to do that, except most 18-year-olds really don't. I was once, for a little while, I drove limos in my life, and at one point in time, I was driving two women and their mother, and one of them was mother, to their for a 40th birthday party. And the two women had gone to high school together, and they were looking at old pictures of them, and like, God, we were really hot back then, and we didn't even know it. And their mom, who's like 25 years older, looks at them and goes, and you still both are, and you still don't know it. So we have all this place where we separate ourselves from our beauty, from our wonder, from our just fantasticness, amazingness that you and I are. We feel shame about our financial status, our relationships, why people oftentimes go to their high school reunions or don't go to their high school reunions. I'm not successful enough to go back there. Who cares? We judge ourselves and feel shame about our intellectual ability to conform to a certain norm. And finally, as we remember the saying that hurt people, we start to get to the source of why people hurt, judge, and shame others is because of their own hurt within. And finally, we can move into a place of compassion instead of adding more blame, shame, or guilt. So let's be honest, we all practice othering, yes? Take a breath. If you're alive in this body, you're practicing othering because we were all conditioned to. It's been around since the beginning of human existence. Even some animals, do othering with other animals. And tribal human behavior has been around since there were humans. So we can practice blaming and shaming ourselves and others when we practice it, or we can just simply become more aware, noticing when, where, and how we do that, and start to shift and do something different instead. Catch ourselves and say, oops, I just did that again, and I don't want to do that. And so instead, we can shift that and practice kindness and respect and compassion. for others and for ourselves. We can remember the song we often sing, let everybody into the circle. Yes? Let everybody in. The truth, by the way, is everybody already is in the circle, the infinite circle. Can we let ourselves in to notice that they and we are in the circle? What we all really want is to feel included, just exactly as we are. Just as we are. Ernest Holmes often said, unity is not uniformity. We recognize that this infinite oneness shows up as almost infinite variety, and that's wonderful. Yes? Think of it. If everybody was a stamped out cardboard cutout of one, form of human existence, it'd be boring. Yes? Tracy Brown, in her book Stained Glass Spirit, which is an awesome book, said, ignoring the beauty and value and uniqueness of different types of people is equivalent to ignoring God and refusing to see all the ways God shows up as humanity. We don't do that with dogs. We don't do that with flowers. We don't do that with trees or clouds or spices or nature or art. So why would we do it with humans? Some of us are capsicum peppers, right? Some of us are hot peppers. Capsicum, it's the hot element in a pepper. Some of us are some nice mild spice. I don't use those, so I don't know what they are. But and as we become aware of this, there are a couple of traps that we can fall into, and that to be aware of as we reduce our habit of othering. The first is to get all wrapped up in calling out each and every minute little tiny way that we can other another person, often with blame, shame, or guilt attached for the othering itself. Okay? Now, there's a value in calling this out. There's a value in being aware of this. And the value is becoming aware of ways we might unconsciously separate and judge off others. Often we aren't able to see things from a different perspective or even be aware of our blind spots until either we bump into them, or they're called out, which can be uncomfortable, yes? Okay. But guess what? Our comfort isn't our purpose in life. Sorry. Opening to a greater inclusion, of all that Spirit is our purpose in life. This is why we're talking, by the way, about taboos this month, is to start to look at places where, my thinking has been this way, maybe I should shift it. The shadow side, however, of calling out all the possible ways that we can other is that it can seem overwhelming. How many of you sometimes get really overwhelmed with everything, all the ways that somebody says I can be hurt? Okay? And then the reaction that many people have is either, why bother to even try? Or kind of a reactionary pushing back with statements like, why don't they just suck it up and deal with it? Okay? The second trap we can fall into is what we call spiritual bypass, where we sit there and go, it's all good. If you feel hurt, that's your problem. It's your thinking. It's your consciousness. We're all one. We love everybody. I don't see color. All that sort of stuff. Yes? But what this does is it bypasses the uniqueness of each of us, the divinity with which Spirit shows up, and then it supports us in continuing to relate to others from our habitual, conditioned perspective. I talk oftentimes about sunrise, sunset, that we oftentimes, that the human consciousness is to say that the sun is rising and the sun is setting when it's not, right? The earth is rotating. But our perspective says, it's rising and it's setting and it's moving around me. I know none of you do this, but you know people who the entire universe revolves around them and their perspective of it, yes? Yeah. Not me. Except when I do. when I was in uh, one year, I was in a leadership conference for CSL, and there was a woman who was addressing us, and she was a large black woman, and she was talking about diversity, and she finally said, she was talking about this idea of I don't see color as being a cop out, and she said, if you don't see me as a large black woman, you don't see me. And so it's seeing each other for the uniqueness that we are. Not sitting there going, I don't see your difference, I don't see your difference. Guess what? We're different. Look around. Do you see an identical person to you in this room? Do you think you'll ever see an identical person to you in life? No. So we can appreciate who we are. We can appreciate our uniqueness. Shifting out of any old pattern is difficult. Have you noticed? Yeah? Our intellect operates by having figured it out and then clings to those old patterns, even in the face of complete evidence to the contrary, because, well, I've been doing it for all this time, and I'm comfortable in this way of doing it, and resisting, it resists ideas that don't align. But our motto here in religious science is change your thinking, change your life. And oftentimes we think, well, if I just change kind of the surface level of my thoughts, my life will change. No, that's not the thinking we're talking about. We're talking about the deep beliefs. We're talking about the deep subjective and subconscious beliefs and looking at those and shifting that. And that's what really truly shifts our life. And even though it's uncomfortable, learning new things creates more freedom for all of us. Tracy Brown, who wrote that book, talks about the one day she received an email from her 89-year-old uncle. And she first thought it was spam because her 89-year-old uncle had never used a computer, wouldn't send an email, didn't even have her email address, and she was almost going to delete it into her spam folder, and she decided to just take a chance and popped open that email. And it said, surprise, I've learned how to use email. And her 89-year-old great uncle, I think it was, had decided finally that he heard about all this internet thing for years. Finally decided to go take some classes at the senior center, figure out how to use it, how to get on it, and sends her this email. I don't know how he got her email address, but he did. We can learn new things no matter what our age. Yes? It's helpful to understand, as we're talking about all this, by the way, three things. We're talking about three aspects of this thing. The diversity, inclusion, and oneness. Diversity is simply the existence of differences. Guess what? Diversity is. Yes, it's just automatic. It is. It's the unity and the multiplicity of form. Inclusion is a little bit different. It's the environment and culture we create in which we honor, recognize, and utilize the diversity within a group. This is the definition that Tracy Brown is using in her book. It's recognizing, honoring, and utilizing. Making it welcome, making it worthwhile. Unlike diversity, it's not automatic. It requires deliberate intention and consistent action to actually make it happen. We have to be conscious and willing to learn to see and do things differently. We have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. Oneness, then, is the natural and always existing infinite oneness and all of life. Oneness describes the relationship between the infinite, between God and us. It does not describe the relationship between two people. Because while we exist within oneness, we are diverse. We are different. And so while under the surface we are one, we also have to acknowledge the differences, yes? And play with that. We're not here to sit in complete oneness for all of eternity. We decided to all show up with skin suits on, right? And come and play in this world of diversity and differences. I sometimes think of life as an amusement park that has all these different rides and fun houses and horror houses and games and all this stuff available, and we get to show up and play in this, which is a whole lot more exciting and more interesting than sitting on a couch in some cosmic couch somewhere just going la. Yes? Yes? Inclusion doesn't mean treating everyone the same, because none of us are the same. True inclusion takes the hard but rewarding practice of getting to actually know someone, to see from new perspectives, to mess up and try again. It's hard on the intellect, but it's fulfilling for the heart and the soul. There's uniqueness and variety, but there is no other. Tracy Brown says, diversity is not the problem. It is the stories we tell ourselves about diversity that is the problem. So this week, 2 practices. Number 1, I kind of already hinted at this. Well, actually, I hinted at the second one. Pay attention to your mind's habit of judgment. And instead of othering, notice the beauty of diversity. And sometimes, I gotta say, it's so subtle. The other day, I was driving down the freeway. I've spent a lot of time on the freeway lately because I've been going back and forth between airports. And so the other day, I was coming back down the freeway, and I noticed a car with California plates on it. And I immediately othered that person. You know, I grew up in Oregon, and back in the 70s and 80s, there was this little phrase, don't Californicate Oregon, as all the Californians were coming up, selling their houses for a whole lot more money and buying cheaper houses up in the Pacific Northwest, yes? And so all that little conditioning came up. Now, I've lived in California for 9 years. My daughters are from California. My grandson is a Californian, and I have lots of friends from California, but that person was a Californian, you know? And I've watched this with people who judge. It's like, you know, I don't like those people. And some people say, well, you've got friends who are those people. Well, they're different. They're different. Okay? So just be aware of the subtlety with which your mind goes. That's what we're going to do first, is paying attention to where do you other? Where do you shift into judgment? And then secondly, look for ways to practice inclusion. Look for ways to get out beyond your comfort zone through intention and through action. You willing to play with those 2 practices this week? Yeah. Right. Really? Sure, maybe. I want to close with a quote, and it's a different quote than the one that I put into the slide, so I'm going to just warn I don't know if you put the quote up there or not, but Sandy Dell right now is going, no, you can't do that. Hi, Sandy. This is from Ernest Holmes' 365 Science of Mind. Today's reading. Through my consciousness of love, which is the very essence of goodness, I transform any apparent imperfection into the perfect idea of true being. I am knowing people as God knows them. I am seeing everything as God must see it. God's law is written in my mind and felt in my heart. I see God everywhere. So take that in. We have an affirmation. Join me in this affirmation. I step into action to create an inclusive world. One more time. I step into action to create an inclusive world. And so it is. Thank you.